Servus, Matthias here, and this is Single Track. As a matter of fact, it's the original Single Track trail running podcast, and this is episode 223. I've been posting shows weekly for almost 4 years now, and at Single Track I share stories of runners, mountaineers, and outdoor lovers, folks who build businesses and organizations that support and lift up our trail and mountain running community. I'm chatting with incredible humans who love what they do, and I hope these stories inspire you on your adventures. Dear listeners, thank you for being part of this ride. And don't forget, this weekend, the Rock Candy Running Virtual Vert Challenge kicks off. Be part of the madness and come chase those hills. Visit rockcandyrunning.com for all the info. Speaking of incredible people, this week I'm chatting with Alison Naney, owner of Cascade Endurance, running coach, massage therapist, and resident of the great Methow Valley. We talk about living in wide open spaces, her coaching philosophy, community building, and a little bit about the Winter Olympics. I don't feel like I'm on Barbara Walters level yet.
It's hard. I listen to so many podcasts that are interview based, and then I'm co-hosting a podcast now.
Oh, cool.
With my friend Devin Yanko, and it's all interview based, and every time I do it, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do the good interviewers do it? Because it's really hard to to ask questions in a way where it's kind of leading, because you know certain things about certain people, so you want them to talk about something, but you don't want to just like lay it up and then them just say, yeah, that's what I do.
It is really
hard.
It is tricky, and I'm convinced that the good interviews are actually heavily edited too. That sort of, because sometimes I feel like the interviewer asks a fairly short and pointed question, and the respondent kind of knows how to respond in that way, and I wonder if the question is edited down, that the person answering sort of knows more than what we are being told. That's how it seems to me like.
Yeah, that actually makes me feel a lot better about things.
Right? Because sometimes I feel like in order to color a question correctly, I have to like talk for 15 minutes to sort of set the scene, and then I'm like, well, wait, this is supposed to not be about me, right?
Right, yeah. That's the main thing, is I don't want to talk much. Like, I want the guest to talk, but you kind of have to talk to get the conversation going and all of that. I have a much greater appreciation and respect for people who do it now.
It's true. And I think you can actually then also sort of fall a little bit off the horse on the wrong side too. If I don't know if that metaphor works, but sometimes I feel like what I then don't like if somebody answers a really, really good question and the interviewer just continues with a complete other question instead of actually responding to that. That feels like that doesn't do the relationship, the actual person, a service. If you know what I'm saying, I feel like, sometimes you ask a good question and the person like really responds honestly, and then you just start with the next question, right? Like respond to what that person said. So
yeah, and I've been trying to also think like, okay, there are certain things that I want to talk about, but how do I not just be attached to those questions when there is a flow that is interesting and could go somewhere, but then you don't know where it's going to lead after that, and that can be kind of scary. Like, okay, here goes, but then we might completely have to change subjects after that.
I personally love that. I love sort of going down this rabbit hole. I feel like that's what makes the conversations interesting, because it should feel like you're just, you and I, we've never met in person. We don't know before we get into this, if we have any synergy, if we have any connection. And so when you have a conversation, when you have a story that sort of goes somewhere, then I think that benefits also the listener the most, because they feel like they are not just getting the information, but they are part of something.
Yeah, I agree.
If that makes sense, right? So
and the ones that I really enjoy, I feel like you can tell that the interviewer is being a little bit vulnerable too. You have to just open up and see where it goes, and you feel like you're learning something about the interviewer as well.
Yeah, and it is tricky, especially if you have a show that is weekly. You come to a point where you are interviewing or talking to people that you don't know, like you and I. And it's hard for me then to prepare and ask the right questions that go beyond, well, I saw 2 photos on Instagram I want to have a question about, and I read this one blog post, and then I checked the ultra sign-up score, right? And so you need to find a way of sort of breaking through these obvious conversations. And for all of our listeners, I'm talking to Alison, and now I don't know if I pronounce your last name right. Naney?
Yep, Naney.
Naney? Okay, cool. Alison Naney, you are calling, and you told me before how to pronounce this correctly, from the Methow Valley?
Methow.
Methow. Okay, you see, this is very hard for me. Methow Valley. So this is Eastern Washington, and you're probably in the snow right now? Yes? No?
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a melt in the last week, and so I mean, we have a lot of ski trails and they're still being groomed, and we have plenty of snow for that. But I went morning and I think it was 50 degrees morning, which is a little unsettling. But we have about 2 feet of consolidated snow outside my door, and likely more snow on the way. Spring doesn't really come until usually about April, where the snow is entirely gone.
Fantastic. I do want to talk about the place where you live and work in a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about you. You are owner of Cascade Endurance, but you yourself do a whole bunch of stuff. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, and then we'll see where we go.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Alison Naney, and it's funny, just as you were pronouncing the last name, I never realized how easy my maiden name was. My name is Allison Hanks, and no one ever had any trouble with that. And then once I got married, I realized, oh yeah, there's it's a little trickier to say. But anyway, I live in the Methow Valley, and I have been a runner since I guess I always kind of ran, but I got into ultra running in 2003. I ran my first one, and used to work at Seattle Running Company back in the day in Seattle, and that's how I really got into doing more ultras, and was really involved in the ultra running community there. And then went to massage school there as well, and then moved to the Methow in 2008. Opened up a practice here. I've been working here pretty much ever since. My husband and I moved to Seattle again in 2014, and at the time we had just had our first daughter, and she was 4 weeks when we moved, and I knew that I would be doing massage again, but I was more motivated to just get back into shape, and so I started doing some group training things for races, and it was a little bit just right place at the right time. I got back involved with the running community there, and that kind of just Cascade Endurance kind of there. So now I coach. Then we moved back here in 2016, and I coach pretty much full time. I also do some massage. I try to quit massage. It just doesn't really work, and it really informs how I coach and makes me a better coach. And my coaching also kind of informs my massage work as well. So the two kind of just go hand in hand, but at any given point, I flex a little bit of how much of one I'm doing versus the other. So right now I'm actually doing mostly no massage this month to focus more on coaching and kind of just have some time to actually get outside and do my own training as well.
Fantastic. Favorite run or race that you've ever done?
Oh my gosh.
I know, right? That's mean.
My favorite run is just the one that I do every day from my house, because I just feel so lucky that I have trails out the door. My favorite race, so funny. We have this question on the podcast that I co-host, and everybody hates it, and I never actually think about what my favorite is. And,
so everybody hates that question? Is it because they're not?
Because it's so hard.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I could have given you that as a hint, so you would have been prepared. I just sort of jumped it on you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, I really love the Washington races. Like, my first thought was Cascade Crest 100. I just feel like it's such the epitome of what the ultra running community is in Washington. White River was always a favorite of mine, and I've helped with that for a lot of years too, and just have really fond memories of it. Running in the Rainier Park is always amazing. I mean, we really just have so much. It's hard to pick one.
No, it is. I know it is a mean question for sure. I love it. I remember the first time I heard about the Methow Valley was living in Seattle during a time when I don't know, was I subscriber of the Seattle Times Sunday edition? I don't know. That felt like I'm dating myself by several decades. But I remember reading an article that was talking about, and it was sort of at the tail end of the first .com boom, and they were saying that if technology progresses, it was before the iPhone, before Wi-Fi, everything, but they were saying that because Eastern Washington has, in some pockets, has really good fiber optics cable, tech companies can move into these areas and offer their employees a much better work-life balance, if you will, as opposed to commuting into downtown Seattle into some high-rise and then commuting back out into the suburbs, if you will. And you could live and work where it's awesome, where, as you're saying, where the trails are out back and you are still fully connected. And it's funny because it always became for me a vision of where I want to live. This, and not necessarily your area in particular, but this idea of saying, I can be connected to the world and not necessarily miss out on good jobs. But still, I don't have to live in the big city. And you lived in Seattle and then you moved back out there. You sort of made that jump.
Yeah, when I lived in Seattle before, so I guess I moved there in 2005, I think. I wasn't there for too long, maybe a little, I guess it was a little earlier, but I knew I wasn't going to live I grew up in a small town. I went to school in Montana. Like, I just always liked the more open spaces and sunnier climates. And I knew I wouldn't be there that long. And then when I moved here, well, I actually kind of considered going back to Montana, but massage is state regulated, and Washington is a really good state for doing massage. And so I wanted to stay in the state. And then I came here for a race, actually, and I basically was just like, oh my gosh, this is like Montana, but it's still in Washington. And so I pretty much right then and there was like, okay, I'm going to move here. And did, and was able to, I just gradually started in my massage practice. And I think, like many people here, like, I think the first year that I lived here, I think I had like 7 W-2s or something, just piecing a lot of things together to make it work. And then I met my husband, and he grew up here. And so we kind of always knew we wanted to be here. He was Nordic ski racing at the time, all over the country and Europe. And so then when he'd retired, he knew he wanted to coach juniors primarily. And there was a new program starting in Seattle. And so that was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. So we moved to Seattle, and he started a program called Momentum Northwest. And and then that's when I was like, oh, well, I've always loved Seattle and I have a lot of friends there. And it was an easy move to shift back to someplace where I knew it and felt really familiar. But I always knew try to get back here as soon as we can. And then, really Cascade Endurance allowed us to be able to do that. And we've been here ever since.
And you're raising a family now out there too, right? Does that work?
Yeah.
Being so far out.
I hesitate a little bit just because there's a little bit of growing pains happening right now in the Valley. I think COVID has been such an awakening for a lot of reasons, but one of those is the fact that remote work is just fine. And there's been a big boom since COVID here, like in many places. I know we're not the only place, but, so I'd like to say it's really terrible and no one would like it. And it makes it really challenging for kids and all of that, but that would be untrue. It's really, it's been great. And it's a known quantity to us too, because we have both lived in small towns. So I think there is some adjustment for some people, but sometimes the power goes out for a long time and that's just the way it goes. And there's certain challenges, but for the most part, it's pretty awesome. And our kids have, they ski and they like to go on little runs on their own. And they have this little boundary that they're allowed to just go run around in. And so it's pretty great.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's awesome. So you do your coaching business before we go into the coaching business, if your husband is into Nordic skiing, are you glued to the Olympic coverage right now? Is that?
Yeah. It's funny. After he retired, he kind of got out of it. He likes it. And now actually he is the program director for the local junior program, and he loves it, but his real passion is more backcountry skiing now. So he likes to get more into the mountains, and I've been really into watching the Olympics, but he's never been just a sports fan. So I've been loving it. And there's actually a girl who is our daughter's babysitter is now she's there right now. And so that's really fun to be able to see her. And he knows some of the other ones just through racing and all of that. So it's pretty cool.
It's for sure. That's amazing. That creates sort of a personal connection through which you experience in those global events that we've all grown up with, but more completely as spectators. But once you actually know somebody over there, then that changes everything, right? The way you perceive it.
Yeah, absolutely. There have been several Olympians who came from here, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very cool. Yeah. So, Cascade Endurance, you're saying, and your website says that you're doing lots of different things, which I think is perfect. I mean, that's essentially how, I don't know, I think sometimes we dream that we follow this one passion, but I think then we get bored. And so it's kind of nice to piece things together, right? And doing multiple different things that kind of keeps it interesting and exciting, as long as it's not out of complete desperation. So tell us a little bit about Cascade Endurance.
Yeah. So it started, the actual business name is Methow Endurance. And I started it in, I think about 2011. Because I wanted to put on a running and yoga retreat here. And I thought at some point someone was going to do something like that, and I wanted it to be me. And so
nice.
I started putting on this event, and then figured I really should have business then if I'm doing that. And then some other things came out of it. We put on some different races and we started doing some coaching. And then when we moved to Seattle, we changed the name to Cascade Endurance. And out of that just came more of the individual coaching. With massage, I have always specialized in sports massage and working on runners and athletes. And I'd often see people who were injured on my table, and I would talk to them about what they were doing for training. And often I would just be a little bit like, okay, well, that is why you're here. There are some things that you might want to do differently that could help. So I kind of see the coaching bit as being like trying to catch people before they get on my table. And of course, injury happens and it's not like you can control for everything, but I definitely do see the coaching bit as being helping people be sustainable and have longevity in the sport. I ran my first 50K in 2003, and there's one injury that I've had that was from a tendonitis thing, and that has been it. And I think that, I've just always prioritized, like, maybe I'm not going to get that very last 5% of training, but I'll be able to still run next year and the following year. And so I kind of have taken that approach too, of like, okay, what can we do in the long term so that it's sustainable and you can really just enjoy all the mountains that are around us, and certainly performance as well. But really looking at it from a health perspective, not purely just like, okay, do as much as you can in the 12 weeks leading up to this race. And then, then that's that. So yeah, it's evolved over the years, and I've always really loved in person. I think coming from back when I was growing up, I did team sports. And then, when I worked at the running store, I helped lead a lot of the group runs and things like that. And so I've just always loved the community aspect. So, doing some in-person stuff as well and working on technique with people and things like that I've always just really enjoyed. So
yeah. And it goes beyond the normal, what's your goal? You want to do this race, or you want to achieve that. How do we get there? Here's a training plan, and now go out and do it, right? The focus on the longevity is a little bit of a different focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also really just love having the relationships with the people I coach. I mean, it's so funny when you first start talking to somebody, they're like, okay, well, yeah, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do to get to this next level or whatever it is. And certainly the training plan is part of it and the nuts and bolts of workouts. But ultimately, we all have busy lives. And really, it's about having someone that can help you navigate, like, oh, I had this really stressful day at work, or I have family coming into town in this weekend, and how do I fit all these things together? And so really feeling like, you really get to know the athletes, and it's just really fun. And at this point with my own running, I get so much more enjoyment just from my athletes accomplishing their goals and like finishing their first 50K, or even just running for an hour. I have one person who worked up to running from here to Mazama, which is like 5 miles or something, and it's just really so fun and rewarding to see clients and athletes evolve and kind of become different people when they accomplish things that they're not sure that they were able to do. And I just love it. It's so fun.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful perspective to look at this, right? Because you are sharing part of their journey and seeing them sort of grow and evolve and achieve is very rewarding.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. And then what's also fun too, just knowing the actual nuts and bolts of training and how the physiology changes over time and all of the different training protocols. Then when you start to just I often will have people do some baseline workouts, and then to kind of give some idea of like, where are we going to see the most gain. And often, you know, someone has this goal and they're like, oh, I'm not really sure. And then I see what they're doing. I was like, oh my gosh, you can totally do this. And like, then seeing the progression of them starting to believe it as well and then do it is just really cool. I love it.
And you're speaking about it in this very personal way. Are you able to do this remotely too? I mean, not your students aren't all living close by that you can see them in person, right?
Right. So we use a program called Training Peaks, which is at its simplest, it's a calendar, and that's where all of the workout, like all the planned workouts go, and then all the data from your watch dumps into it. And so every day I see, excuse me, I see what people do for the workouts. And then there's also a part where it just says what the like post-workout comments. And so then that gives the context and the subjective of what's going on in their lives and how the run felt or how the workout felt. And then we make changes based on that if necessary. And just a lot of communication through, you know, just what their schedule is like and all of that. And it's a lot of, like, it might not seem like you'd get much information each time, but over time you realize like, oh yeah, like I kind of know a lot of your life just based on the day-to-day. You know, if you end up texting with someone every day, even if it's just a little bit, over time you're like, you really know what's going on in that person's life. And so it's a little bit like that. And obviously it depends on the person of how they want to share. But overall, it's just the little daily tidbits add up to knowing the context of people's, like, where they're going to see the most gain and how we can improve different parts of their training. So.
Oh, fantastic. So this is the coaching side. And do you do then in-person stuff in the Methow too?
Yeah. It kind of goes in waves. I've been trying since I very first moved here to try to get a weekly run going. And most people have trails out their back door, no matter where they live. And so it's a little bit harder to get everybody to come at the same place at the same time, because you can just go from your house and everybody is pretty spread out. Like Winthrop is the kind of the more central town, and like I live 10 miles away from it. There's another town that's 8 miles in the opposite direction. So it's a little bit more dispersed, but just in the last couple of years, it's been easier to get people together. So I'll do either workout series where it's a progression of like track. I'm going to be doing a track series in the spring. And so then that can be just a good time to shake out the legs after skiing and build some speed. And then some just group runs during the week, a weekly group run. And then sometimes I'll do some clinics where just working on technique and things like that. I was always surprised when I very first moved here, people would be like, oh, I could never run like that. And be like, well, no one just starts running a lot of miles. Like if you learn how to run well and, you know, the mechanics of it, then you could run. And so I find a lot of joy in that as well, just helping people make running not hurt. Because a lot of people have that feeling of like, oh, it just hurts me. And I have the feeling that we can run, like all of us can run if we want to.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I need to get back into running. You're speaking about it in a very enthusiastic way. And over the dreary winter here, I've gotten fresh air, but I've not really been very focused on my running. I've sort of neglected my Strava entries. So I'm hoping for the weather to get better. Yes. So very cool. That's Cascade Endurance. Tell me about your podcast. You're saying you're doing a podcast. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, my friend Devin Yanko, who I met when I was working at the running store way back when, was living in Seattle at the time, and we would run together. And she now lives in Colorado, but she moved. She was in the Bay Area for a long time. Super fast runner, and last year she wanted to start a podcast, and she sent an email out to a bunch of her friends saying, "Hey, will you be on my podcast?" And I immediately wrote back and said, like, well, I don't really want to be a guest on your podcast, but I would love to co-host it if you would want. And she said, yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. And so, I've been the co-host, and it's been really fun. It's called Women of Distance, and we interview different women in the sport, mostly, but, we want to broaden that a little bit as well. But, yeah, and it's interview based, and try to just highlight more women who are out there kicking butt, who maybe aren't getting much attention. So it's been really fun, and it's been really fun to do with a friend. She has a lot more, she's been more available until now, at least. Like, I definitely have been the one I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to try to fit this in. And yeah, with the fires last summer, and we took a little bit of a break in the summer, and then now we're kind of getting back into it. So it's been really fun.
Oh, fantastic. So we'll link the podcast up in the show notes so people can check that out. Super. So, we talked about every aspect of Cascade Endurance. No, not really, because if you go to your website, there is a whole bunch more. Like, people really need to check out the website, because you've got like workout videos that people can do themselves, and nutrition tips. Like, you have a very full featured program there, which is very cool. A lot of times these days when you look at somebody's website, there is like, here, hey, this is me, and that's it. So you actually got quite a bit of content on there.
Yeah, thanks. I love working with other people, and a good friend is a dietitian, and she's helped with my running camps when I've done them, of giving a talk on nutrition. And so I wanted to bring her on so that I'd say that's probably one of the more common questions about with training, is also nutrition. And I'm happy to give people, I feel comfortable giving people advice like, yes, make sure that you're eating before your workouts, and very general things. But when it comes to anything more than that, I really want to have somebody who really is knowledgeable about that. And so that's a relatively new addition that I'm really excited about. And we often would just send people to her just because we would, it wasn't associated with our business, but then we're like, actually, what if we actually had you, what if we partnered and had you work with us a little bit more? So that's been really great. And then the other piece that, I guess, just in terms of my coaching philosophy, and for especially training people for mountain sports like skiing or mountain running, I just feel that strength is really important, and a lot of runners don't do any kind of strength at all. And so that was the impetus for putting the strength videos on there, because form is so important with that kind of thing. And I'd often YouTube, search different exercises, and I would never find one that I liked what they were saying. And so so we made our own. And yeah, just really trying to have people be well-rounded. I think because of my massage background, people would be coming to me and like, oh, I have this Achilles thing, or, name anything. And then I'd put my hands on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you're so, so tight. And so trying to figure out ways to work that in while it still is remote coaching, but having having resources available for people so that they can work on these other aspects so that you're not gonna just get tighter and tighter and tighter and then snap. So, and it's fun for me. It turns out that Cascade Endurance has just been this really fun, creative outlet for me as well. I think about what are the things that I would want to know and to have access to. And so I just kind of put that out there.
No, it's great. It's a great resource. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. I do want to talk about Rim to Rim to Rim. You ran it last year. Let's quickly talk about Rim to Rim before I ask my final question. How was it the first time for you down there?
It was, yeah. I've spent a lot of time in the Utah desert in the Southwest, but never down to the Grand Canyon. And it was really fun with a bunch of friends, and we had perfect weather, and it was just one of those trips that was really, really fun. So I'm not sure what specifically. I actually had a little bit of a bonk and had a really rough climb out of the canyon, but for the most part, it was a really great run.
I don't have anything in particular. For me, I did it for my 40th birthday, and I'm originally from Germany, so I didn't really get to see much of the U.S. I just moved here to Washington State and sort of have hung out here. I mean, you visit New York and San Francisco and stuff, but I've not really seen the country. And so for my 40th, I thought, okay, if I do a run, it needs to be somewhere special. And so I put Rim to Rim out there because that sort of felt very iconic, and it was iconic. It was amazing, especially never having been in the desert, never having been down there before, to sort of come there the day before and then just run it. And I mean, I also crawled out of in the middle of the night up the Bright Angel Trail. But it's been really fun years later, because it's such an iconic route, to be able to connect with other people, because it's almost on everybody's list. And so at some point people do it, and then you can talk about it.
Yeah, it was all too. I think probably for 10 plus years, I'd wanted to get down there, and I've had so many friends that had done it, and it had never really worked out. And, so I was really excited to do it. And we decided spring, a bunch of friends, actually it was like similar to this time of year. I guess we planned it a little bit earlier, but it's cold and dark and snowy, and we just thought, oh my gosh, a spring trip in the sun and the desert sounded so nice. And this was actually, I turned 40 during COVID along with several other friends. And so this was kind of our like belated 40th birthday trip as well.
Yeah, perfect.
And all of us have kids. And so it was just so fun to go. And I mean, the run was spectacular as well, but really the whole thing was just so amazing because we only had us to take care of. And it was just one of those really fun trips. But the route itself was also, I love downhill running. And so that part was just like a dream. And then the whole next section was really great. And we didn't all run together. We just started relatively similar times. Some people started a little earlier who thought it would take a little longer. And, but then we just would randomly just kind of end up at the same places at the same time. So it was just really fun. And, we ended up at the North Rim right around the same time. And so we kind of got to, reconnect, and then everybody would just kind of space out again, on the way down. Everybody was running their own pace. And then, and then I think for everyone, that last climb was just pretty terrible. And we decided to go up the South Kaibab instead of the Bright Angel, because there was a bridge closure that was going to happen at a certain time. And so we just wanted to make sure that we would be able to get across. And it turned out it would have been fine, but we wanted to see both trails. And so we went down Bright Angel and then up South Kaibab. And, it was real hard.
Yeah. Now I can imagine. I did it the opposite, and I felt like South Kaibab was challenging because of the mule tracks. There's so much uneven terrain. Wherein Bright Angel wasn't fairly. I mean, it was insanely hard climbing up because of the elevation you gain, but the trail itself was reasonably easy because you just put one foot in front of the other. Right?
Yeah, and I think I would do that next time because South Kaibab was beautiful. Like I was really glad that we saw both. But at one point, I remember I was listening to a podcast, and then that ended, and I was going up the switchback, and I thought for sure, like according to my watch, I think we had about a mile left, and I was like, okay, I can do this. And then there was this sign that said like 3.5 miles, and I just like collapsed onto a rock, and I was like,
yeah.
It took forever, but
I know. I enjoyed looking at my pace on my on my watch. It was fairly new in my, or it wasn't even on my watch. I didn't even have a watch back then. That's how early in my running career, if you will, it was. It was like 55 minutes a mile. This sucks.
It was probably better that you didn't have a watch. At some point,
I know.
Why do I have this thing? It's just making me feel terrible.
I am not moving. Is this thing still on?
I know. I do want to go back, and I think if I go back, I'd maybe do it in the fall.
Okay.
But I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, the fall would at least. I mean, coming here from Western Washington, it's hard to prepare yourself for the heat. When we did it, it was really, really hot in the afternoon coming down North Kaibab. I like collapsed at Cottonwood, and I've told this story many times on this podcast because by the time we ran into a hiker at Cottonwood, and they told us that you can get Gatorade, lemonade or whatever at Phantom Ranch. Well, no, we didn't. We walked in, and they were like, "No, this is you can't have any. Only the people who are staying overnight can have something."
Oh my god!
I know, and we were like the entire. I don't know how many miles it is from Cottonwood to Phantom Ranch, but the only thing that kept us alive because we were so dead was like Phantom Ranch is gonna have some form of refreshment for us, and it was nothing.
Deep disappointment.
I know.
Oh, that's awful. Well, we got it. I wonder.
I know.
They must have changed their policy or something.
I don't know what it was. If it was the time of day, because I think we hit it right after the dinner time for the people who stayed there, and perhaps they thought I wanted something, I don't know what it was. It must have been a fluke or somebody who didn't really know. Anyway, I tell the story to everyone because everyone always talks about how gloriously refreshing the lemonade at Phantom Ranch is. And I'm like, yeah, must be nice. Must be nice.
Oh, man. Yeah, it was pretty great. One thing that was interesting, though, most of my desert experiences were backpacking in college. I would go down during spring break, and then I did this 2-month backpacking course down there, and so it was just moving at a much slower pace. And that was one thing that was interesting about, like, I thought I would have this connection with the place after doing the run, but I think because we were just so quickly in and out, it was like when we got back home, I was just like, did I just really do that? Like, it almost just felt like a dream because we didn't spend a ton of time there. So next time I would love to spend a little bit more time, and I don't know, being on the river for that long would be, I don't know if I could handle that, but it would be cool to be able to be down there for a little bit longer and explore a little bit more.
Yeah. I hear you. What I thought was super cool is that if you compare it to most other people who visit the Grand Canyon, they because we were in and out of the park, out of the South in general, so quick, was that most people who visit in national parks like that, they only see it from the surface. But we were able to go so deep, so fast. And so it was a much deeper experience than if you would have just, showing up and taking a couple pictures. That's what made it really unique for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, I mean, we actually thought about that with, in Europe, you don't have things like that, do you? I've only been to, mostly I've just been in cities in Europe, but the vast difference.
I think the dimensions is really, I remember when I first moved over here and friends from Germany asked me, what's the big difference? And I said space. I mean, the dimensions are just completely on a different scale, right? And the vastness of nothingness in between that makes it. I mean, Phantom Ranch is Phantom Ranch and is, if you think of it from a mileage point of view, still reasonably accessible. If you compare it to the Alps, you've got a little hut every 2 to 3 miles where you could get lemonade, where you could get something. So the Alps obviously are big, massive mountains too, but it does feel a little bit more connected and approachable, as opposed to this massive vastness of places like the Grand Canyon, for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So, why don't you, let's wrap this up. Why don't you tell my listeners where they can get a hold of you, what they should be checking out, and then we'll link all of this to show notes. And yes.
Okay. Cascade Endurance website has the most, and I have a newsletter that I don't do very often. It ends up being about quarterly. We've got resources on the website, and it's on Instagram as well, Cascade Endurance. I really don't do Facebook. And then me personally, I'm also on Instagram at Alison Naney, but I'm also not very active on that. I guess that's about it.
That's awesome. Alison, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Appreciate your insights and your stories. Appreciate connecting about rim to rim to rim with you. That's always something very special for me. And
thanks for having me.